Welcome to the Live Well, Perform Better podcast, brought to you by Below the Line. My name is David Duggan, and I am part of a team made up of experts from the worlds of business, elite sport, adventure, and health and well-being. We are coaches, mentors, and advisors to some of the world's biggest companies and organizations, as well as smaller businesses, entrepreneurs, and people looking to make their mark on the world. Our guiding mantra at Below the Line is Live Well, Perform Better. What does that mean, you might ask? Good question. Maybe the easiest way to describe it from our perspective is finding the formula that works for you when it comes to things like looking after your physical and mental health, running your business, developing your career, leading your people, or simply being able to show up as brilliantly as possible into your own life, both for yourself and those around you. That's why each week I sit down with a member of our team or an invited guest for a conversation that focuses on the question, what do the words live well, perform better mean to you? This question is a way into exploring with people from a range of different backgrounds, industries and disciplines. What are the practices, techniques, habits or ideas that they use to help them to show up and be at their best in all areas of their lives, whether that's as CEOs, leaders or managers, or as parents, family members or friends. We keep it short and sweet so that you can extract all the good stuff and get on with the rest of your day, and hopefully put some of this knowledge, experience and expertise into play for yourself. This week I'm delighted to be joined by a very special guest, Cara McGillivray. Cara is the Experience and Engagement Lead at Allianz Partners, where she is responsible for building programs and interventions that support people to achieve greater performance and fulfilment in their working lives at what is the world's largest financial services company. In a wide-ranging discussion, Cara shared with me her own story and the path that has led her to where she is now. From training initially as a teacher to getting started in the insurance industry to motherhood and all points in between, Cara also spoke candidly about the metaphorical cliff edge she very nearly fell off in her early 30s and how she avoided it, thanks to the awakening she had into how she was living and the changes she has since made to her lifestyle, health and habits. As well as all of this, Cara also spoke to me about the challenges she sees organisations currently grappling with to provide meaningful and impactful experiences to employees that help keep people motivated, connected and attached to their employers. You can subscribe at www.belowtheline.ie, where you can stay up to date with our podcast, as well as exclusive online events and sessions, including our Press Pause coaching community and our story coaching programs. Thanks for listening and see you next week. Yeah, tell me, why do you do what you do?
Well, I was thinking on this, and it's a really interesting question, I suppose, because we don't often stop and ask ourselves this one until someone poses it to us, like you are to me today. And after 16 years of my own professional life, I didn't ask it of myself until I had to, as part of one of my assignments for my master's. And the topic was around writing a letter to your future self in 5 years' time as a reflection piece on where you are now and where you see yourself going. As part of this, it was a practicing organization psychology module. And it was a real game changer and an eye opener for me. And I still talk about it and think about it this day to this day, you know, in terms of helping me identify what I am actually interested in over what I thought I should be doing. I suppose, and even more critically, what, you know, success should feel like over what I thought at the time it should look like. To answer your question, I originally wanted to be an English teacher and did an undergraduate degree in English and geography to be a secondary school teacher. But once I had that and it was time to do the postgrad for teaching, secondary school positions were scarce and they were crying out for primary school teachers at the time. And I suppose myself and my now husband had just bought our first apartment, and driven by the need for financial stability, I decided to go and just get the job and went into the financial services. Well, also with the idea to go back and do my postgrad. But sure, 1 year led to another, and 2 different companies later, I started to progress in operational management from a team leader to management over division. So over like the course of 12 years, teaching didn't really become a reality. And in truth, I suppose it was a long forgotten ambition, as I was happy, you know, I was progressing at that time. And I was young, or let's say younger, and it was all about progression and climbing the ladder, you know, or so I thought. But flash forward to a career change into HR in 2017, where I still believed I would work my way up, you know, to being from a senior HR business partner I was at the time to a HR manager, and then the dream of eventually becoming a HR director. until I started my master's in work and organizational psychology in DCU, shout out to them, it's an excellent course. I felt I really grew up in a way and stepped off, I suppose, the hamster wheel that I was on at that time, just progressing and moving up to each role, which is what we're kind of taught in school and how we believe you should be successful. But at that time in my master's, I really got, I suppose, the time to reflect on what I was doing, where I wanted to go, and also the change of career really gave me that time to reflect on it. So in that, writing that example in that assignment, it really gave me time to think of like, what my career, what my aspirations were and where I was going. And it dawned on me that I didn't want my boss's job or their boss's job. And in fact, I didn't want to do or be a HR business partner at all, but really wanted to kind of combine my operational leadership knowledge of actively being in the dugouts or on the ground, being in an active leadership role, which I think in a way distinguished me from my colleagues in HR who were purely HR driven. And then adding that to my HR knowledge and experience that I'd gained to kind of help other leaders to become better leaders, perhaps through development programs and interventions. And ultimately, that my hybrid knowledge, I suppose, of both HR and ops would be an asset in terms of employee engagement and experience. And lucky enough for me, that's what I've ended up doing now over the last 12 months in my current role. I'm a regional employee experience and engagement lead for the North Central Eastern European region within Allianz Partners. So I'm responsible for developing programs and initiatives around health and well-being, inclusion and diversity, and employee engagement. And in many ways, that's brought me full circle. It's what I really reflected on in my assignment to my teaching ambitions, but in a different format, I suppose, because my role involves educating, creating awareness, running workshops, coaching, and a lot more. So I was only explaining this to my 15-year-old who's currently trying to prepare for his junior cert and is very anxious about not knowing what he wants to do. And we're just trying to get through the junior cert at the moment, but I was giving him that whole example going, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I thought I did, but I've ended up in something completely different, but in a way, not so different. It does encompass the teaching element that I wanted to be involved in the first place.
You're 12 months into this new career, and a lot of organizations talk about this idea of engagement. But I'm just wondering, what does that mean from an organizational point of view?
Yeah, I think it's definitely was one thing, right, pre-pandemic, and in terms of the offering and the basicness of what you're, given to your employees around. I suppose we have a affiliation with, health insurance companies, that they come in and they provide talks now and then, or get your booster jab. And sure, it'd be nice to have something running in the background where we maybe have a CSR community thing that we do. It was all kind of, I feel, a little bit tick the box. But I definitely, 100%, we all know the pandemic has kind of changed everything, because the whole focus for organizations was making sure that their employees were okay, comfortable at home, not overwhelmed, still able to do their job, very much looking at the whole person, I think, rather than just seeing them as an employee who comes in 8 to 5, 40 hours a week, offers what they do, and then, thanks very much. Whereas I think organizations and leaders had to appreciate that, there's more to life than work, and that people were, under pressure in terms of managing their home life and personal life, which was all in the one space. So I think now engagement has flipped less in terms of, ticking the box and just providing the basics of, we have a few health talks here, you have your health insurance too, really in terms of what we're doing anyway in Allianz Partners, holistically involving everything for the employee around, what is diversity and inclusion, we call uniqueness. So appreciating the entire person, creating that space and that caring culture for people to express who they are, feel that they're comfortable to come to work, and to really develop leaders to understand and appreciate the emotional intelligence side of their role, the softer skills, and to be more empathetic. So I suppose it's, to summarize, it's to be more, to show more in action than, just in sending out PowerPoints and offering different kind of talks around certain things, to actually put practice into action, to showing that you are a caring organization, to ensure that your leaders from the top, are living the values, and I suppose getting involved in these issues. So we would have top CEOs now being sponsors of diversity inclusion networks that we have. Just items like that. I think that's what it means. I think, and that's the difference in what it was pre-post pandemic.
Our strapline, as you know, is is live well, perform better. I'm just wondering, what does that mean to you, just based on your own take on that?
Yeah, I think this strapline can be applied to all aspects of our lives, and so it's not only professionally, but personally in our relationships, emotions, and mental health. I think we're all too familiar now, like I was saying, coming out of this pandemic, and how important, to use that word again, holistic wellness is, and that it's not just enough, to get up and be active, to do your walk in the morning, and then you feel like that's your wellness ticked off. But we need to instill and develop healthy habits for ourselves around lots of different aspects of our health, be it that sleep, nutrition, mindfulness, even creative time is something that I, over the course of the last few years, have realized something that you kind of forgot to do and how much joy it brings. But to do things like that, to make us accountable every day, to ensure that we're looking after ourselves in all aspects of our lives so that we can perform better professionally. And I think we all know this to be the case, but we don't often practice it right. And I think this is probably a current problem that we probably have, is that there's lots of information flooding in and we know the right things to do, but the main pressure point for everybody is time. So I think it goes back to being careful about carving out that time and being very conscious to carve out that time, to know that if you're not looking after yourself, you like, it's the old adage, you 100% can't look after everybody else until you're in a good place yourself. And I'm not sure if this is an age thing, as I've spoken with people quite younger than myself who are on top of their game in terms of mindfulness and psychology around, I suppose, even the human experience. But I can only speak to my own experience that as I've gotten older, and particularly in the last 4 years, I'm more conscious to ensure I live better, to ensure, as you say, that I perform better. But it's work, and it's a lot more than motivation. It's discipline and habits.
You've kind of anticipated my next question, which is, what are the practices or habits or behaviors that you engage in?
Yeah, sure. I think as well, this has evolved and grown over time. This particularly, I feel like I've had a big change over the last 5 years, but 100% my main thing for me, and has been since I was in my early 20s, was the gym. So that was pre-children, having time for myself, but especially now, I get up every morning at 5:30 and I'm in the gym for 6, and I never miss it. And if I do miss it, I'm quite frustrated with myself, because not from an aesthetic motivation. I mean, that's obviously a nice benefit, but more so for, this is the time for me that I have for myself before I have to deal with work, or, and I say deal with, but like, show up, say, as a mother and as an employee. So I really have that time to have, and it's 2 full hours I'll give myself, and listen to a podcast, listen to a book, whatever, while I'm physically being active. So I'm doing something for my body, but also for my mind. And even if that means sometimes where I can't get to the gym for that time, say if I have an early meeting, I have to be on a call at 8 a.m., I still will get up and make sure, and I do it at the weekends actually, and that I get up an hour before I really need to do something, if that's to have a coffee and sit and reflect on something, plan out something on my phone, maybe a holiday or whatever it is. Like the basic fundamentals for me is getting that time to myself. The next thing I really focus on is sleep. So as I say there, I get up a lot early. I do get up early. I mean, I was in the gym at 5 before the pandemic, before they changed all the different times. So I used to leave my house at 4:30. But I was so foolish years ago. This is a big learning curve for me, and that I used to drink up to 7 cups of coffee and think I was absolutely fine. Didn't affect me, because it didn't. Like, I could sleep, but I also would get, by the time I got all my children to bed, like, they're a lot older now, but I used to be frustrated that I wouldn't have this time to myself, this time that I'm talking about. So I would end up sitting up watching TV stupidly late, and just doing all sorts of nonsense and not going to bed, often sometimes at 12, half 12, and get up at 4. And I did that for a long time, but I didn't feel, and I suppose I was that bit younger, I was in my 30s, I didn't feel affected by it. I mean, I still am in my 30s, but anyway, early 30s. I didn't feel like, I thought it was all fine and rosy until the pandemic happened. And it wasn't just the pandemic, but I'm just using this as the time frame when it came to realization for me. I've been doing this for a couple of years, so kind of low sleep, but then the added stress, and eventually we all know, and I know now, that's just going to hit you like a brick wall and you're going to have burnout. But only when I did my master's, which was extra pressure, then we had homeschooling in the pandemic. And during that year, I was writing my dissertation, it was in my final year. it really hit me like a brick wall. So to say I experienced burnout, yeah, would be putting it mildly, but that was a tough time. And that really made me go, you need to actually step back here and cop on. So now I have a really big sleep hygiene process around making sure I'm being realistic. If I can just get 7 hours, I'm happy. So I have like a timer on my phone, my watch, to tell me time to go to bed, take my zinc and magnesium. I invested in a diffuser there recently, like cut out screen time. I've incorporated like things in my life, my personal life, that helps in terms of getting my younger one up to bed. She's nearly 10, so that we can read together and we have a set time, but that gets me up. It's just around putting in this practice and routines. That's definitely a big thing. Another thing is I'm focusing on recently, or a lot, I suppose, in the last number of years, is this connection with my friends. I'm very good at staying in contact with my friends, organizing time to do things every couple of weekends, or and people often look and think, oh, you've 3 children and you have a full-time job. And if you're to look at social media, and I don't post and like, oh, here I am, I'm out for dinner. But, you start worrying, or you can start worrying to think, oh, people think, well, it's grand for her. She's off there. Like, does she ever spend time with her children? You don't always post things that you do with your children. That's an aside note, I'm thinking, but I do make time for my friends. So I'm always trying to plan it. And this is what gives me motivation, keeps me going, is, okay, in 2 weeks' time, I'm going to meet such and such for brunch, or we might go for a walk, or we might go for a hike. My latest thing is this whole connection with nature and being out in the outdoors in the sunshine for as long as I can, but just really to see different kind of landscapes is a huge thing that I do for myself. It's time for myself, but it's also, I do it with friends. So I kind of hit 2 nails with the same hammer, sort of combining that. And lastly is creative time. So I spoke about that earlier. And when I was doing a lot of group coaching during the pandemic, through my organization, but around the health and well-being topic and around maintaining healthy habits, while remote working, it kind of dawned on me, as I was kind of helping other people find their own solutions, but just for myself, that, geez, I had stopped doing things like baking. We're basically just baking or cooking new recipes, because I just had given it up, but I'd forgotten how much joy that brought me, or just that was my own kind of meditation. I haven't mastered the art, and I'm giving myself the time to sit down and do meditation, but I realize there's different forms of it, and that's definitely one for me. So I do that every week. I'm constantly cooking something maybe 2-3 times a week, just something different. And for me, it kind of hits the creativity, meditation, and kind of time for myself thing. And one more, it's just learning and development, constant. That's a healthy habit for myself. I've realized, and I've kind of said it already, about changing and evolving. And I think this is, the older I'm getting, I'm realizing that we do go through these cycles every 5 to 7 years. And I am different from who I was 5 years ago. I'm sure it'll be different again in another 5 years. So I'm constantly just listening and reading books around psychology and the human experience, just to try to understand myself, but also how I apply that to other, like my professional life, and also like my personal relationships with my family, friends, and husband even. So there's a few things there.
Wow, it's really impressive. And I'm listening to kind of feeling almost exhausted, but I'm wondering, what's the difference, do you think, in how your family or other people in your life experience you now versus a couple of years ago when you weren't doing what you're doing now?
I think that's a very interesting question that you've just asked me, because there's definitely a change, 100% in me. From years ago when they were all younger, I'd say I would have been very uptight and fraught, and I'm a type A personality, so everything had to be perfect. And, my children had to, not that they had to look perfect, but just that I had to make sure everything, like the house was clean when people came, or everything was running as it should be. And this was my whole, I don't need to sleep. I'm on 7 cups of coffee and I'm fine. I have this full-time job and the kids are great and everything's great. And I think underneath that all, I suppose I would have been a much more anxious and wound up person with my kids, or something broke, would have been a big deal. And this is kind of flipped on its head now over the last number of years. It's not to do with them getting older. It's 100% to do with me changing, reflecting on myself, understanding what's important, what's not important. I think that, well, it's definitely a fact of saying, and it's the same for all kids, right? The first kid would probably have a lot more pressure or reaction from parents than, say, my daughter, the third one. And, they think they get away with murder. But it's definitely, as you grow older, you just realize the value of what's important and what's not. But I think I don't think I know a lot of the work I've put into myself, and just even the books I've done and the time I spent often my long walks or listening to books and reading stuff. A lot of the stuff is designed to help you as a person grow that I'm reading, and find yourself. For example, I read this really incredible book last year, How to Do the Work by Nicola Pereira. And it's very much designed at understanding yourself, your inner child, and why you are the way you are, be that positive or negative, from any positive or negative experience you had as a child. But I actually really at the time used it to make myself a better parent for my 12-year-old daughter at the time, and just things that she was going through and adolescence and change. So I think if I wasn't that way inclined and I wasn't putting all that focus to grow and develop in myself, I wouldn't be reflecting it as a parent or a friend or a partner.
It also sounds to me like you came to realization about giving yourself permission. Would that be true?
Yeah, definitely. Permission as well, to forgive yourself, or to accept, things maybe that were flaws, and identify them. And and not to be defined by them. I've learned a lot recently I'm not like I am I was calling myself a perfectionist for a long time, but I've stopped doing that because I think it's kind of a negative label on yourself. It's just, I like things a certain way. And then it kind of define me going, well, that's because I am this and I seek to be the best. And I have to, constantly chase this perfectionism. And I also, probably late to the game, read Rhonda Byrne's The Secret. And that whole, I am, you manifest what you are. And I was thinking to myself, well, I am. If I keep telling myself this, I will act and behave like this, and that's not pleasant to be around. It's great in many aspects. It helps you, and I think it has definitely helped me, I suppose, succeed, perform, and drive myself. But there's other negative aspects to it where you can be too overwhelmed and too engaged, too obsessed with things. So I stopped defining myself like that, calling myself things like that, for sure.
And you touched on this earlier as well. If I miss a day in the gym, I can get a bit antsy, and I know that experience myself if I miss a day's exercise. But do you, if you miss something or if something slips, how do you recover, and how do you just manage yourself? Are you hard on yourself and still in that respect?
I think, not as much now. I definitely probably would have been, and I would have, if I missed the gym, had a full day work, say, and maybe then I had to deal with the children, and then I had to do maybe some more work late at night because I don't know, say there's stuff going on, but the whole time it would be bugging me to not get out for a walk or to do a class at home, or just basically to say to myself I've done something. So I started, and that's only really in the last 2 years, definitely in the last 2 years. I've started to give myself permission, even as you said, and test myself to not do it. I would make myself sometimes, as I said, if I was working late, still go out and do a walk or still work out, and it could be 10 o'clock at night. That was nearly obsessive, but just to tick a box and to be in control. It's being in control is what that is. So I've given myself permission sometimes now to go, okay, it didn't happen. And to kind of have a chat with myself and say, you're actually not going to do this. It's okay to take a day off. It's okay not to do your full schedule if that happens. I'll give you an example. Actually, this morning, I charged my Fitbit watch. It was dead nearly before I went off. I had my quick cup of coffee, and whilst I was and I'm very much like my watch, and I'm trying to get even sometimes the 10,000 steps in the gym before we leave by doing a run or whatever else after my weights. And I was doing my weights, and I realized that I didn't have my watch on. And for a second, I was very frustrated with myself, and I just thought, well, so what? Like you're relying on this piece of machinery to tell you that you've done could be even 6,000-7,000 before you get out of here. You'll be okay. Go home, put your watch on, and if it doesn't hit 10,000 today, and in your head you've actually done it by the time you get your little stuff done. But complete example this morning, and I did actually check myself, and I had a good chat with myself going, that's ridiculous. It's actually just a watch. It's about how you feel, what you're actively doing yourself. I know I've gone and done my gym this morning, so I don't need, something to tell me and give me fireworks to give me a pat on the back. So there's an example of, learning to adapt, which I wouldn't have done years ago. I might have, to speak to what I was saying earlier, gone out and made sure I got the physical steps on the watch.
Do you think that stuff that you engage in for yourself, what type of impact does that have on the role you do now, or how you're able to do it? I'd imagine that somebody who's doing that type of stuff can come from a greater place of authority when it comes to talking to people around engagement and employee experience, etc.
Yeah, I suppose it definitely it has had an effect, twofold effect. I think I've gone down a rabbit hole of listening and reading to a lot of stuff I did over I suppose around my dissertation. Then when I came out of it in the pandemic time, it was still lockdowns. And for me personally, it was too heavy. Like I was listening to too much information and reflecting too much on my own life. So much so that I identified it myself going, God, all the stuff I'm listening to is quite heavy, that I started listening to some life biographies and stuff. You know, I changed all that. But from my professional experience, it's definitely bolsters of my knowledge, I suppose, and things that we could do within the organization. And I definitely think 100% my academic background in terms of studying psychology and identifying research papers, being able to read them, but just being exposed to different organizational psychologists. I don't know if you know of Adam Grant. I'm a massive fan, of him. Well, I read his papers. I did trust basically for my dissertation, and it was all around vertical vulnerability and trust and how you can show vulnerability vertically as a follower to a leader, when a leader very clearly can show you vulnerability and has no impact on them, but how can you reflect that backwards? So that's a big thing I've brought in, and do a lot of things around trust within I suppose my role, and I can identify the gaps on that and suggest different programs. But I love Adam Grant's podcast, how to make, what's it called? Oh, it's just called Work Life. But his tagline is, how to make work not suck. Get so much information from him, and he just speaks the truth for someone who's academic, but can also reflect to organizational life. So I think from my role, I because I'm constantly listening and interested in that, and interested in the human experience, right? I'm constantly trying to bring in different things that we can do or look around in terms of even particularly the diversity and inclusion side. That's kind of an area I'm really kind of dipping my feet more and more into, because I feel, and I think this goes back to my draw to be a teacher or to help and to nurture. I think ultimately I'd like to be involved in something. I know, I keep saying that a lot during this interview, sorry, but I know I'll eventually end up doing something that has a purpose and is maybe not organizational driven, and that's given back to, that's 100% what I want to end up doing myself. So within my role, that's kind of what I'm looking at as well.
And picking up on that and shifting the perspective, if you like, with your HR practitioner's hat on, you've touched on the diversity and inclusion agenda, but are there any other issues, whether that's health, well-being, performance challenges, that you're seeing in terms of what people in your organization or in the wider world, whatever it might be, are facing right now?
I suppose we have a lot of target operating model kind of changes. There's a lot of changes going on. So we have a lot of programs around assisting leaders to effectively, guide their teams through the change. So I suppose that's the same in terms of the way we are remote working across the world now. That could be applied to lots of different organizations, but we definitely have a lot of change programs coming in to support leaders, and also adaptations into how we manage learning and development as organizations, right? And we don't have that face-to-face anymore, and how we can continue growth and talent development within organizations. So that's definitely something else that we're focused on. And the big thing is the mental health. So, it's okay to say you're not okay has been kind of a campaign done over the last couple of years, but more specifically in training or recruiting in employees who want to be a part of this mental health first aid kind of committee that we set up. And we trained over 25 people to be trained in mental health first aid as a kind of second response, different contact for employees to reach out to if they don't want to contact HR, EAP, their employee assistance program, or their line manager. They can effectively reach out to someone, and we're a global organization across any part of the world. We have people everywhere that they'll never see or will never know them, to remove the stigma that they might have associated reaching out. So that's kind of been in the health and well-being space, something that we're looking at. Yeah.
And my last question, again, just based from your own perspective, what's the one piece of advice you would give to anyone who's interested in this idea of living well to perform better?
There's many answers I could give to this question, ensuring you spend equal time on 4 quadrants of your life that, I actually didn't touch on them, but for me, like, that's around health, your relationships, work and finance. or invest in time to get to know yourself, you know, what you like, dislike, what you dream of, and what you want your time on this planet to be, by just learning to actually stop, reflect, and redesign your life, like what I had done, I spoke of earlier on. I could speak around all them, but I think I have to say fundamentally, my one piece of advice is sleep, to get enough sleep. As I've learned the hard way over the years that not getting enough sleep and thinking it was a badge of honor, and how all that caught up with me and eventually does to everyone. And that, you know, if you don't have enough sleep, all four quadrants of your life, again, for me, that's like your health, relationships, work, and your finance, are not being serviced as they should be, because you're not cognitively or emotionally equipped to respond to the challenges within them, or and also to grow from them, because you're just on a hamster wheel of deprivation. So fundamentally, my one piece of advice for anybody is to, ensure you have good sleep.
Fantastic. Cara, you're a force of nature, and I knew this was going to be fascinating, and it has so it has proved to be. So thanks very much for giving me your time and coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it, and I wish you every success now with your own role and those hopes and dreams and ambitions that you have for yourself as well. You thoroughly deserve them. Thanks a million.
Thanks, David. I'm really delighted to be invited to participate. It was really good fun for me. Thank you.